for certain circumstances that are related to international travel in those communities. But I think the
national shelter in place.
I think the American people, what I'd suggest to you, Jim, is the American people can look at these numbers in the other 48 states, and they can see that in the last 15 days, the president's coronavirus guidelines were working. And that's precisely why President Trump is asking every American to continue to put these guidelines into practice for 30 more days.
Mr. President, can I follow up on testing? Just a quick question.
If I could. So right now we're at about 4,000 deaths here in the United States. You're suggesting a spike of more than 90,000 deaths over the next few weeks. Do you have a demographic breakdown of the areas that are most at risk and where most of those deaths may occur?
Well, right now, and I think if you ask Chris Murray, he would say he's using the information coming out of New York and New Jersey and applying that to potentially other states having the same outcomes. I just want to say again, this yellow line, and this is all corrected for 100,000 residents. So this is normalized so we can compare apples to apples. This is still Washington State, this yellow. So they've been able to, for a long time of measuring cases, not have a spike. So it's possible, and we're watching very closely to make sure it doesn't have a spike. But that's what the people in Washington State are doing. This is what every community, Washington State early, about 2 weeks before New York or New Jersey. California, a week before New York or New Jersey. Really talked to their communities and decided to mitigate before they started seeing this number of cases. And now we know that that makes a big difference. Early, as Dr. Fauci said, if you wait till you see it, it's too late.
Do you have a demographic breakdown, Dr. Birx, of where these deaths may occur?
So there's a demographic breakdown that we've discussed before related to mortality. And it's as we're seeing in New York exactly what we saw in Italy. Very low mortality, not to say that young people under 30 or young people under 40 aren't getting ill. They are, but most of them are recovering. So the profile looks identical to Italy with increasing mortality with age and pre-existing medical conditions. And so that is holding in the same way. But what we're hoping is that through the work of communities, and again, it comes down to communities. This is communities deciding that this is important to them to not have the experience of New York and New Jersey. And I think, we are worried about groups all around the globe. I mean, I don't know if you heard the report this morning, there's 8,000 ventilators in the UK. If you translate that to United States, that would be like the United States having less than 40,000 ventilators. We have 5 times that amount. So, these are the things that everybody is having to face. And I think the United States is in an excellent position from our medical care position, but we don't want to test that system. We want this to be a much smaller epidemic with much smaller mortality.
Can I just follow up on the testing question real quick before we move on? So the testing numbers, I understand 1 million tests done, it's a big increase, but we were told there would be 27 million tests available by the end of the month. So can you outline where in the supply chain, where in the logistics chain are those other 26, where are the other 26 million tests right now?
I think this is just for purposes of clarification. There's a difference between sending a test that can be administered to a test being done. Because a month ago or more, the president brought together the top commercial labs in America and said, we need you to partner with us to create a brand new system that would rapidly process tests. We're now at 1.1 million tests, and we believe it's a fair estimate that we're testing about 100,000 Americans a day. That'll continue to grow. It'll continue to accelerate. But I think the misunderstanding early on was there were many tests being distributed, many test kits being sent, but under the old system, as the president's described it, the antiquated system, those were being processed in state labs or at CDC or in private labs on a very slow methodical a system that could only produce maybe 30 to 50 tests a day. But this new partnership that we have with commercial laboratories allows the progress we're making. But the breakthrough with Abbott Laboratories now moves to point of care, which means you're going to have devices and tests that people will literally be able to take at their doctor's office, at a hospital, at a clinic, at a nursing home, and have the results in 15 minutes.
So those 26 million tests we were talking about, were those tests under the old antiquated system? And
Yes.
now, so are we still even using those 27 million tests, or have we just completely moved on to the point of
The answer
care
is
tests?
yes, now
So
through the new system.
even today, which is, I have to say, coming out of laboratories and developed tests and worked on vaccines and then gone to the field to actually combat epidemics, it is disappointing to me right now that we have about 500,000 capacity of Abbott tests that are not being utilized. So they are out, they're in the States, they're not being run and not utilized. So now we have to figure out, how do we create awareness? Because sometimes when you put an early platform out, like our first platform out in the high speed was Roche. So you get that out, people get dependent on that and then don't see that there's availability of other tests. So right now, there's over 500,000 tests sitting, capacity, that are not being utilized. So we're trying to figure out, how do we inform states about where these all are? How do we work through every laboratory association so they're aware? And how do we raise awareness so people know that there's point of care, there's Thermo Fisher, there's Abbott testing, and there's Roche. And if you add those together, that's millions of tests a
Not
week.
being reported.
And they're not, and so those are the
But they're
all,
not being reported.
or they're not even being used. So that's what's really, so that's what we're working on.
What's the reason they're being used?
Because when people